The corporate table J.A.McKenzie. Chapter 1, The door is locked. The room was silent but for the faint tick of the wall clock and the uneasy shifting of bodies. 7 people sat around the long mahogany table, each with a drink untouched in front of them. The windows were shuttered. The overhead light buzzed faintly, casting the sterile glow across their tense faces. 3 women, 3 men, 1 murderer. The door creaked. In stepped Lee Anderson. She was short, barely over 5 feet, but her posture was straight as a metronome. Her pale blonde hair was tucked behind one ear, and her steel-gray suit was crisp enough to draw blood. She smiled politely, too politely, and shut the door behind her. Then she turned the handle, rattled it. Locked. "Why is the door locked?" she asked, as though it were merely a curiosity. No one answered. Lee crossed the room and sat in the empty chair at the head of the table. Her fingers steepled before her, her smile cool and precise. "My name is Leah Anderson," she said. "You don't know me, but I know all of you." A pause. The flick of her eyes across the table. "You're here because one of you committed a murder. A quiet one. Efficient. Brutal." Someone shifted in their seat. Lee leaned forward. Her voice was soft, but it cut like a wire through flesh. "The corporation will not allow disgrace. That's why why the doors are locked. No one leaves until the truth is found." A beat. The sound of a throat being cleared. A cough. "I know what you're thinking," Lee continued. "Why not call the police? Why not report it? Because this isn't about justice. It's about containment." She smiled again. "I don't care why you did it. I care who did it." Her eyes lingered on each face in turn. "So shall we begin?" Chapter 2, 6 Faces. Lee let the silence stretch just long enough to pull the nerves tighter. Then she turned slightly to her right. "Mr. Alden Price," she said. Alden looked up, lips pressed into a tight line. Mid-40s, angular build, navy suit a shade too sharp for a casual gathering. His tie was perfectly knotted. His cufflinks gleamed with the logo of the very corporation that had summoned them here. Regional Director of Operations. Married. 2 children. Known for his efficiency. Feared for it, actually. Her voice had no malice, just observation. "You're also the last person who saw Carla Jennings alive." He flinched barely, but Lee noticed. A tragic coincidence, I'm sure. She turned to the woman seated next to him. Ms. Eloise Venn. Eloise was younger, perhaps late 20s, with auburn curls pulled into a loose chignon and dark eyes that didn't flinch. She wore a forest green silk blouse, elegant but understated, and her hands were still perfectly still on the table. Communications specialist. "You've only been with the company for 9 months, yet you received a performance bonus double the regional average. Impressive, unless you consider whose projects you were suddenly assigned." "After her death." Eloise blinked. Once. Lee moved on. "Dr. Patrick Lorimer." Patrick offered a stiff nod. He was tall, lean, in his 50s, wearing a tweed jacket and wire-rimmed glasses that slipped slightly on his nose. A nervous tick tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Henevar, you wrote the internal memo on the failed patent, the one Carla was going to take public. That could have tanked your department. But now, conveniently, the documents disappeared from the server. Patrick cleared his throat. Are you implying I'm misting facts? Leah replied calmly. Interpretation comes later. She turned to the next woman. Ms. Brenda Knox. Brenda met Leah's gaze directly, arms folded across her chest. Mid-50s, commanding presence, no-nonsense gray blazer, and a scar on her left hand that looked like it had a story. Head of security, ex-police. You've seen your share of bodies, I imagine. Yet somehow, Carla's was found on your watch and not for 12 hours. Odd for someone known for her vigilance. Brenda narrowed her eyes. Watch what you're suggesting. Lee gave a tiny shrug. Ogden facts. To Brenda's right sat a man in a maroon jumper, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Jonah Reed. Jonah smiled faintly. He looked out of place. Unshaven. 30-something. Disheveled charm. Data analyst by job title. Freelance poet by attitude. You were the only one Carla called the night she died. Twice. You didn't answer. He looked up. Didn't hear it. Lee's voice was mild. But you read every one of her messages the next morning and didn't tell anyone. He said nothing. Finally, she turned to the last woman, seated near the door. Greta Mowen. Greta was older, perhaps in her 60s. Petite, well-dressed in a soft lavender cardigan, and with kind eyes that didn't quite mask the tightness in her jaw. Admin assistant to the executive team. You've been with the company for 33 years. You know everyone's secrets often before they do. And yet, after Carla's death, your access logs show several unusual entries. Greta blinked, lips trembling. I only know need to explain. Yet. Leah sat back, surveying the table. One of you murdered Carla Jennings, she said. The others may have motives, lies, and secrets, but one of you ended her life, and I've been authorized to find out who. She folded her hands. The sooner we begin, the sooner this room unlocks. Chapter 3. The Ghost at the Table. Carla Jennings was not in the room. But she might as well have been. Her name sat heavy in the air, unspoken but ever-present, like perfume clinging to silk long after the wearer has gone. Lee reached into the leather folder beside her and slid a photograph across the table. The image was simple Carla, seated at her desk, caught mid-laugh, her head thrown slightly back, golden brown hair cascading over one shoulder. A coffee cup in her hand. Bright eyes. Sharp angles. Life. The table fell silent. She was brilliant, Lee said quietly. Harvard Business School. Recruited straight into the corporation's innovation stream. Within 6 years, she was leading a strategy portfolio, triple her rank. She glanced at Patrick, then Eloise, then Jonah. And she made enemies just as quickly. Carla had been 34 when she died. The official cause, cardiac arrest. Natural causes, at first glance. But the toxicology report disagreed digitalis in her bloodstream. Sourced not from medication, but from raw extract foxglove, likely ground and brewed. Fatal in the right quantity. Almost untraceable in tea. Poison in plain sight. She died at home, Lee said. Alone. But someone had been there before she took her last sip. Someone who left no prints, no trace, nothing except a motive. She tapped her finger on the table. Once. Carla knew something, or threatened to say something, and for that, she died. Brenda Knox's jaw twitched. Greta's eyes moistened. Lee let the silence return for a breath longer. Her files were wiped within 2 hours of her death, Leah continued. Her backup server? Gone. One report retrieved from the cloud, flagged as corrupted, a projected audit of regional assets. Names, dates, money trails. She leaned in. Carla wasn't perfect. She was ambitious, exacting, and, depending on who you ask, a little ruthless. That she didn't deserve what she got, and neither will the person who gave it to her. Her voice dropped, just enough to chill the air. One of you poisoned her, and I'm going to find out who. She picked up the photo, slid it back into the folder, and snapped it shut. Then she looked to Alden Price. Let's begin. Chapter 4. The first lie Alden Price didn't blink when Lee called his name. He adjusted his cufflinks, sat straighter, and offered a measured nod. You said I was the last to see her alive. That's true. I visited Carla's office the day she died, late afternoon, around 5:30. Leah's pen hovered over her notepad. What was the purpose of the visit? She requested a meeting, Alden said smoothly. Wanted to discuss a reshuffle proposal. She believed one of our regional branches was diverting funds. She had some theory about irregular contracts construction vendors. Offshore payments. I told her to send it through proper channels. And did she? No, he said with a hint of a smirk. She never did. Leah tilted her head. So she raised allegations of fraud and you dismissed her? I asked for evidence. She had none. Patrick Lorimer shifted in his seat. Lee caught it but didn't react. She was agitated, Alden went on. Paranoid. I assumed she was trying to stir trouble ahead of the promotion cycle. She was ambitious. Ambitious. You mean she wanted your job? She wanted everyone's job, he said, with a thin smile. Carla didn't play team games. Lee scribbled a line on the page, then looked up. Security logs confirm you entered her floor at 5:03 p.m. But you didn't leave until 6:14. That's 47 minutes. Unusual for a conversation you say went nowhere. Alden frowned slightly. She was emotional. She brought up some personal grievances, her bonus, missed recognition, being passed over. I let her vent. No shouting? No threats? He hesitated. Not from me. Lee leaned forward slightly. What did she say, Alden? She accused me of protecting someone, he said. In procurement. She implied I was ignoring a paper trail that pointed to bribery. Was she right? He held her gaze. No. Across the table, Eloise Venn made a quiet sound barely audible. Leah looked her way for half a second, then back to Alden. Did you take anything from her office? No. Did you see her drink anything while you were there? I didn't notice. Lee closed her notebook slowly. Carla's desktop was wiped 3 hours after your visit. We traced the wipe to an internal IP address someone with executive-level access. You're one of 5 with those credentials. Alden exhaled, his jaw tightening. That wasn't me. Of course not. Lee's voice was mild. You're the regional director. Why would you need to hide anything? A faint flush crept up Alden's neck. Lee let the silence settle, then turned to the group. Anything to add? She asked the others. Eloise Venn's lips parted. He's lying. All eyes snapped to her. Lee sat back in her chair. Interesting, she said. Go on. Chapter 5. What Eloise Saw. Eloise Venn sat very still, as if regretting the words the moment they left her mouth. But the damage was done. He's lying, she repeated, quieter now. About the meeting, about how it ended. Lee didn't press. She waited. Eloise glanced at Alden, then looked away, twisting the silver ring on her finger. I stayed late that night, she began. We were rolling out the new internal dashboard, and I wanted to test the interface one last time. Carla's office was 2 doors down. Her light was still on. Leah's voice was gentle. What time was this? Closer to 7. I was just packing up when I heard voices. The memory returned in slices, the hum of fluorescent lights above, the dull throb of end-of-day fatigue, the sound of raised voices behind a half-closed door. Carla's voice first, sharp-edged and furious. You think I won't go above you? Then Alden's, lower, colder. You'll sink with the ship you're trying to burn, Jennings. Eloise had paused mid-step, the corridor dim and empty. Her hands were trembling, and she didn't know why. Through the frosted glass, she saw blur Carla on her feet, pointing. Alden, standing stiffly by the window, jaw tight. You know what I found, Carla said. I've got names, off-book contracts. Why would you protect Brenda Knox? A beat of silence. You really don't know what you're poking at, do you? Alden said. Then, the sudden sound of something hitting the floor. A mug, maybe. A sharp intake of breath. Eloise took a step back, heart pounding. She turned and hurried down the hall before they could see her. Back at the table, her voice trembled slightly. I didn't see anything physical, but the way she sounded, she was scared. Not angry. Not anymore. Alden let out a mirthless laugh. And yet you didn't say a word until now. I didn't know she'd die, did I? Eloise snapped, surprising herself. I thought it was just another office fight. God knows we've all had them. Brenda's voice, cool and dry, cut in. So she accused him of covering for me? Lee raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Eloise shook her head. I don't know what she meant, but something had shifted. Carla wasn't just fishing. She knew. Lee stood and walked slowly to the whiteboard mounted behind her. She uncapped a marker and wrote one word in thick black strokes. Motive. Then she underlined it twice. She knew, Leah murmured. And that made her dangerous. Her eyes swept the table. Thank you, Eloise. That was helpful. She turned next to Patrick Lorimer. You're quiet, Doctor. Would you like to be next? Patrick paled. Chapter 6. The enforcer's mask, Brenda Knox, didn't flinch when her name came up. She simply leaned back, crossed her arms, and fixed Eloise with a stare that could shave glass. So Carla thought Alden was protecting me? she said. That's rich. Leah tilted her head. You don't deny knowing about the offshore payments? Brenda gave a humorless smile. You're assuming I look at finance reports. I run physical security, Miss Anderson. Not accounting. You also have level 6 access. You could have seen anything she flagged. I could have. Doesn't mean I did. Lee stepped closer to the table, studying Brenda the way one might study a fortified wall looking for the weak stone. You were head of security the night Carla died, and yet the alarm logs from the East Wing were deactivated between 8:05 and 9:12 p.m., right when someone could have accessed her office. That's your awe. Jurisdiction. Brenda didn't blink. That's assuming someone went back in after hours. Lee raised an eyebrow. Aren't you the one supposed to know that, Ms. Knox? Silence. Jonah let out a low whistle. I've seen this movie. It ends with the ex-cop drawing a sidearm. Brenda's eyes slid toward him. Careful, Reed. I'm still licensed. Lee allowed the tension to stretch, then crossed her arms. Tell me about your relationship with Carla. Brenda's jaw worked. We weren't friends. She didn't like protocol, thought security was a nuisance. She filed 3 formal complaints about me in 2 years because I refused to give her unrestricted building access. What was she looking for? Access to records, server rooms, the security desk logs. She said we were obstructing accountability. And were you? No. Brenda's voice sharpened. We were following procedure. Carla wanted the keys to the whole building because she thought everyone was hiding something. Leah scribbled on her pad. And were they? Brenda didn't answer. Eloise cut in. You didn't like her. That much is obvious. Brenda gave a thin smile. That doesn't mean I killed her. No, Lee agreed. But it might mean you looked the other way. Brenda's nostrils flared. I've worn a badge longer than you've held a pen. I don't look the other way. Lee locked eyes with her. Everyone has once. A flicker. A flash, barely a twitch in Brenda's right eyelid. Lee saw it. You protected someone. Maybe not because you wanted to. Maybe because you had to. Brenda stood suddenly, palms flat on the table. This is a witch hunt. No, Leah said calmly. This is a corner. And you've just walked into it. She let the words hang. Then, gently, sit down, Brenda. A long moment passed. Then Brenda sat, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. Lee circled behind her, pen tapping. You may not have killed Carla, but you helped bury what she found. She turned toward the others. And that makes you part of this. Chapter 7, The Vanished Audit. Patrick Lorimer sat rigidly in his chair, as though bracing against a storm he'd known was coming. His fingers interlaced on the table. His tweed jacket looked suddenly too warm, his shirt collar too tight. Beads of sweat had begun to gather just beneath his hairline. Lee stopped in front of him and placed a single sheet of paper on the table. A printout. Faint watermark. The title read, Internal Forecast. Review Cross-Regional Budget Irregularities. Draft author, Dr. Patrick Lorimer. Date, 2 weeks before Carla Jennings' death. I assume you recognize this, Leah said. Patrick cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. It was a preliminary document, never completed. It flagged inconsistencies, nothing conclusive. Leah folded her arms. It was deleted. Yes. It didn't pass internal review. No, Lee said coolly. It passed something. It passed across Carla's desk. Patrick stiffened. She referenced it in a secure email to internal risk, Lee continued. The email never reached its recipient. Someone intercepted and purged it, but the metadata survived. She leaned in. Why did she call your audit the smoking gun? Patrick opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands tightened. I don't know what she meant by that. Lee raised a brow. Let me help. Your audit didn't just show inconsistencies. It identified a string of regional transactions rerouted through shell vendors' subsidiaries that didn't exist 2 years ago. On paper, it looked like construction costs. In practice, the money disappeared. Patrick looked down at the table. I wasn't sure. I wasn't really to accuse she was, Leah cut in. And that made her dangerous. He swallowed hard. I thought if I just waited confirmed my doubts she was poisoned, Leah snapped. Waiting wasn't a luxury she had. The table fell still again. Lee circled behind him. Did you warn her, Patrick? Or did you just bury the report and hope the problem would disappear? She confronted me, he said quietly. Came into my office 3 days before she died. She said I was stalling, said people were going to get hurt. She had that tone like she already knew. And she asked for the original files. The ones I'd marked as confidential. I said no. I told her to wait until I'd cleaned it up for official review. Lee leaned over his shoulder. And then you deleted it? He looked up at her, eyes wide. No. Someone did. I came back from a meeting, and the draft was gone. The entire folder. I thought it was an error. No backups? They were encrypted. Then wiped. Convenient, Alden muttered. Leah stepped back to the whiteboard and wrote another word. Cover-up. Then she turned slowly back to Patrick. Someone erased Carla's lifeline. Either you handed them the knife, or you left the door open. Patrick buried his face in his hands. I didn't think it would go this far. Lee stared down at him. It always goes this far. Chapter 8. Messages left unread. Jonah Reed twirled the corner of a paper napkin between his fingers. He hadn't looked up since Patrick spoke. The others sat stiffly, watching him waiting. Lee took her time approaching. Jonah, she said softly, you were the last person Carla tried to reach. 2 calls, 4 messages. He didn't answer right away. His thumb dragged across the torn edge of the napkin, slow and methodical. She always called when she was spiraling, he said finally. Late nights, big revelations, big fears. I thought it was just another storm. You didn't listen to the voicemails. I saw them the next morning. He sighed, low and bitter. I couldn't bring myself to press play. I thought I was giving her space. Lee placed a small digital recorder on the table. Her voice lost its softness. You don't have to play them now, she said. Because I already did. That made Jonah look up. And for the first time, his eyes weren't aloof. They were haunted. She was panicked, Leah said. The first message was clipped. Background noise. She said, "They found the draft." Then, "Don't trust them. Don't trust ended cuts." He blinked. Once. Lee continued. The second message was clearer. She was afraid. Not just of being fired, of being silenced. She named Brenda, and she begged you to call her back. "I was asleep," Jonah said, voice hollow. "I didn't hear anything until I woke up." "You two were close?" Jonah nodded slowly. "Not romantically. We weren't like that. But she trusted me. We came up through the same grad program. She said I was the only one who hadn't tried to use her." Lee stepped around the table. "Did you ever wonder why she trusted you? Because I didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to hear answers to." Leah raised a brow. "That sounds dangerously close to complicity. I didn't kill her." "No," she agreed. "But you knew she was in danger, and you did nothing." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know it was real. She said stuff all the time about corruption, about people watching her. She saw shadows in daylight. And this time, she wasn't wrong." Jonah dropped the napkin. "I live with that." Lee let the silence sit. Then she slid a single printed photo in front of him. "You recognize this?" It showed Carla's front door, captured by a traffic cam. A figure in a hooded coat approaching. Timestamp, 8:19 a.m. p.m. The night she died. "That's not me." "No," Leah said. "But it was someone who had her keys. And your messages. And erased her backup drive just after midnight." Jonah stared at the image. Then he whispered, "Greta." The entire table turned toward the older woman seated by the door. Lee didn't even blink. She turned, slowly, toward the last silent figure in the room. "Chapter 9, she said quietly. "Let's talk, Ms. Mallon." Chapter 9. Greta's silence. Greta Mallon sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. But now all eyes were on her. She adjusted her glasses, a slow, practiced movement. Her lavender cardigan was buttoned to the collar. Her brooch, a silver swallow, glinted softly in the overhead light. Lee didn't sit. She stood just beside Greta's chair, quiet but coiled. "You've worked for the executive suite for 33 years, Leah began. "You've typed every memo, seen every name, cataloged every off-site meeting and unregistered phone call." Greta blinked slowly. "I keep records." "That's all." "That's never all," Lee replied. "You don't last that long unless you know how to listen." She placed the photograph on the table the hooded figure outside Carla's flat. "It wasn't you in the coat, but it was your key card used to access the secure server at 11:48 a.m. p.m., the night Carla died." Brenda sat forward. "Greta doesn't have night clearance." Lee nodded. "Exactly. Which means someone used her credentials. Or..." She turned to Greta. "She let them." Greta didn't speak. Lee walked a slow arc behind her. "You were the last to leave the building that day. Security footage shows you at reception at 7:38 p.m. You said you were just tidying the filing room." No response. "You were also the one who signed Carla in for her last meeting that afternoon with Alden Price." Still nothing. Lee stopped just behind Greta's chair. "Tell me, Greta, What did Carla say to you when she left? At last. Greta spoke, her voice soft, aged but clear. She said, "If I'm not here Monday, look in the archive." A ripple passed through the room. Lee leaned in slightly. "And did you?" Greta's eyes were distant now, fixed on something far away. "I didn't have to," she whispered. The next morning, the drawer was already empty. Lee narrowed her eyes. "What drawer?" "The old records vault," Greta said. "Sublevel 2. Nobody goes down there anymore. Not since the restructure. But Carla did. She was down there the day before she died. She used my key. Why? Because she was looking for contracts. Originals. Paper trails no one could delete. She said someone forged the timestamp logs on a vendor review, that the digital trail was clean. But the paper said otherwise. Lee's pen was still now. "She found something," Greta said, voice trembling. "And she showed it to me. What was it?" Greta's lips parted, but her voice cracked before she could say it. She called it the engine. Said it was the reason everything else had been made to disappear. Lee stepped in front of her now. "Greta, did you give someone access to Carla's documents?" Greta's voice was barely a whisper. "I warned them." "Warned who?" Greta shook her head, eyes glistening. "I didn't mean for her to die. I justy thought they'd frighten her. Make her stop. She didn't stop." Lee knelt, so they were eye to eye. "Who did you warn?" Greta didn't blink. "The board liaison, Mr. Carr." Lee went still. Around the table, the others exchanged stunned looks. Jonah spoke first. "Carr? But he's in Zurich. He's barely ever here." Greta shook her head slowly. "He's always been here, just not in the light." Lee stood and turned to the group. "We're not dealing with a single murderer," she said quietly. She wrote one more word on the board: conspiracy. Then she turned back to the room. And Carla Jennings was about to bring it all down. Chapter 10. The last hours of Carla Jennings' Friday, 4:36 p.m. The elevator lights flickered once as Carla Jennings descended to sublevel 2. The air changed as the doors opened, cooler, stiller, forgotten. Concrete walls. Low lighting. A faint scent of dust and old paper. She walked with purpose, heels echoing in the dim corridor. Her ID badge was clipped at her hip. In her hand, a narrow silver key borrowed from Greta, without explanation. She reached the archive door, slid in the key, opened it. Rows of steel drawers lined the room like mausoleum vaults. She went straight to the second row, third drawer. Vendor contracts, 2007-2012. Carla had seen the digital logs. Scrubbed, overwritten. Clean. Too clean. But paper didn't lie. Not when it was stamped, signed, sealed. She flipped through the folders with practiced hands until she found it. Garriston Holdings. Contractor ID #408ZX listed under regional renovations. But Garriston didn't exist before 2000 Tenand. The contract was dated 2009. A ghost vendor. The ink was smudged, but the signature wasn't. A. Price. She stared at the page for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and took 3 photographs. Friday, 5:42 p.m. The meeting with Alden was short. Furious. You think I forged that? I don't touch vendor sign-offs. You're the only one who benefits if this stays buried. You need to stop chasing shadows. Carla. No, she said. You need to start fearing the light. Friday, 6:19 p.m., she texted Greta. Found it. Will drop digital trail tonight. Paper copies in safe. If I vanish look. Sub 2/drawer 3. Greta didn't reply. Friday, 8:07 p.m., Carla was home. She poured herself tea. Her hands were shaking as she typed the email to internal risk. The cursor blinked. Then the screen flickered. The draft disappeared. Server error. Rebooted. Gone. She stared at the empty screen. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number? You should have stayed quiet. Carla backed away from the desk, heart hammering. She reached for her bag, grabbed the flash drive, slipped it into the lining of her coat. She called Jonah. It rang twice. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. Jonah, it's me. It's real. The Garriston files, they're forged. Brenda's logs were used to wipe the trail. I think Alden's covering for something bigger. There's someone above him, maybe Carr. It's not just fraud, it's a system. Click. The power cut. The apartment fell into shadow. She moved fast. Toward the balcony. Toward light. A knock on the door. She turned. One final breath. Then silence. Back in the present, Lee stood before the group. The photo of the archive contract sat on the table. She found it. She tried to share it. She died for it. She turned back to Greta. And you helped them find her. Greta's eyes welled with tears. I thought they'd just take the files. I didn't know. Lee didn't respond. She looked around the table. Someone gave the final order. Then she walked to the door, unlocked it, and looked back. We're not done. Chapter 11. The vote. The door remained shut behind Leah, though she'd unlocked it. No one moved. Her voice hung in the air like a fuse just lit. We're not done. Brenda was the first to speak. She's testing us. She already knows, Eloise whispered. Alden scoffed. If she knew, we'd be in cuffs by now. Patrick rubbed his temples. This is madness. None of us are trained for this kind of pressure. Oh, now it's pressure. Jonah cut in, voice tight. Carla was under pressure when she died. You were sitting on a report that could have saved her. Greta looked down at her folded hands. Silent. Pale. A beat passed. Then Brenda stood up. Let's settle this. What do you mean? Eloise asked. Brenda pointed to the door. She's unlocked it, but no one's walked out. That means we're still in play, and I'll bet my last pension dollar she wants to see what we'll do when the lights go out. Jonah narrowed his eyes. You think she wants us to vote? She invited it, Brenda said. She didn't say it, but she did. She laid the truth on the table and walked away. Patrick looked horrified. "We're not a jury. We're witnesses," Brenda snapped. "To a murder, to a cover-up, to the truth. And if we don't act, we become accomplices." The table fell into an uneasy silence. Then Alden stood and adjusted his cuffs. "Fine," he said. "Let's vote." Brenda scowled. "Of course you're eager now." "We each say a name," Alden said. "One person. The one we believe bears the most guilt for Carla Jennings' death. Majority rules." Eloise shifted uncomfortably. "And what happens to the person we name?" We turn them over," Jonah muttered. "To who?" Patrick asked, his voice cracking. "To the police? To Lee? To the board?" Greta finally looked up. "To the truth." A silence longer than the last. Then Brenda said, "I'll go first." She looked straight across the table. "Alden Price." His mouth twisted. Predictable. "You threatened her," Brenda said. "You oversaw the departments that funneled the payments. You had access to wipe her logs. And you came out of this with a bigger office. She was reckless." Alden barked. "She was about to make a mistake that could have taken down the whole organization." "That's not a defense," Jonah said. "That's a confession." Alden turned. "Then who do you vote for, Reed?" Jonah's stare was ice. "Greta Mallon." Gasps. She gave them the location. She held the key. If she hadn't said anything, Carla might have had time. Greta looked down again. "I didn't, you did," Jonah said. "And you let her die for your silence." Eloise trembled. I can't choose." "You must," Brenda said. "Or we'll never leave this room the same." Eloise looked from face to face. Her voice was barely audible. "Patrick." He blinked. "You deleted the audit, or you let them do it. That report could have saved her." Patrick was shaking now. "It wasn't me." 3 names. 3 votes. No consensus. Patrick spoke next. "Brenda Knox?" "What?" she growled. "You allowed a security lapse. You could have seen who came and went. You failed the one job you had." She didn't respond. 4 names. 4 directions. All eyes turned to Greta. Her hands shook. She looked across at Jonah, then Brenda, then finally Lee's empty chair. And then she said softly, "Alden Price." His jaw dropped. "You can't be serious. She came to me," Greta said. "Crying. Said if she disappeared, it would be because of you. 2 votes." "Alden." Lee's voice returned, as if from the walls themselves. "We're not done." The lights dimmed slightly. A soft click. Somewhere, a door unlocked. But no one stood up. Not yet. Because in that moment, what mattered wasn't freedom, it was the growing certainty that one of them had voted wrong. Chapter 12. The Voice That Remains. The door creaked open. Lee Anderson stepped inside, calm as ever. But this time, her coat was unbuttoned. her shoulders dusted with the ash gray of the outside night. In her hand, a small flash drive, its silver casing dull from years in a forgotten pocket, the metal slightly warped. No one spoke. She walked slowly back to the head of the table and sat down. "I found it," she said simply. Jonah leaned forward. "The backup?" Lee nodded. "It wasn't on the cloud." Carla hid it the old way stitched into the lining of her trench coat, her last insurance policy. She slid the drive into a small reader and connected it to the sleek black tablet in front of her. The screen glowed. One file. Audio. Time-stamped. 8:03 p.m. Day of death. She hit play. At first just static. Then a click. Breathing. Carla's voice. Shaken, but steady. "If you're hearing this, I didn't make it through the night." A sharp inhale. "You were right, Jonah. I couldn't stop. Even when they warned me. Even when Alden slammed the door and said I'd ruin everything." A pause. Footsteps. Her voice lowered. "It goes higher. Not just Alden. The contracts were pushed through with executive override. That means Carr. Maybe more." Another breath quieter now. "They used Brenda's clearance to wipe my logs. Patrick's report was buried with a mirrored signature. Greta tried to stop it." A rustle. A creak. "Someone's here. Outside." Her voice rose in urgency. "Listen to me. The name to follow is Marcroft. Vendor shall. Carr is laundering through Marcroft to buy silence. Offshore. Cayman. Then split to tech subsidiaries." She was moving, now hurried, whispering. "If you want the truth, follow the money. And don't trust anyone who stayed silent." Another pause. "Tell them I tried." Click. The recording ended. Silence fell like dust. Leah looked around the table, slow and measured. 3 of you were named. 1 of you warned her. The others enabled the machine. She stood. "Carr has gone underground. But the Marcroft connection is real. This is bigger than murder. It's a corporate organism. And Carla tried to kill it." Alden's voice was paper-thin. "You're going to leak it?" "I already have," Leah said. "There's no way to stop it now." Brenda exhaled sharply. "What happens to us?" Lee looked to each of them in turn. "That depends on what you do next." Greta's eyes were glassy. "Is that it then?" Lee walked to the door and opened it. Light from the corridor spilled in. Cool, clean. "You're free to go," she said. "But know this." Her gaze locked on each face. Carla Jennings was not your punishment. She was your last chance to do the right thing. That door won't open again. And with that, she turned and disappeared down the hall, leaving them alone with the truth, with the silence, and with the voice that would never stop echoing. Epilogue. Echoes 6 months later, the headlines came first. Multinational under fire after whistleblower leak reveals financial deception, unreported death. The Carla Jennings archive, a digital canary in the corporate mine. Then came the resignations, the arrests, the stock crash. Carr vanished. The board scattered like rats in floodwater. but the ripple effects ran deeper quiet, personal, irreversible. Alden Price was the first to fall. He stepped down 3 days after the leak, citing family pressures. Weeks later, he was charged with conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. The trial began in spring. He wore a thinner suit. He looked smaller under cross-examination. His lawyer never quite explained why he erased Carla's logs or why his signature appeared on a vendor that didn't exist. He's still awaiting sentencing. Brenda Knox refused the media circus. She retired the morning after the leak went public, moved north, bought a fishing boat, refused all interviews. But her name appears in footnotes of the internal investigations flagged for obstruction. Never indicted. Not quite innocent. Not quite guilty. Just tired. She still visits the old precinct on Fridays. Never wears her badge. Doctor. Patrick Lorimer was quietly removed from his post. The university he once lectured at declined to renew his visiting role. He wrote a public apology on a private blog. It was read by 6 people. He now consults for a second-tier biotech firm in Belgium. Nobody asks him questions. He doesn't offer answers. Eloise Venn transferred to another department, then left the company altogether. She now volunteers for a digital transparency nonprofit, gives talks on whistleblower protection and data integrity. She keeps Carla's photograph on her desk. Some nights, she still wakes up hearing her voice. Jonah Reed disappeared for 2 months. He was found living in a cabin 3 hours from the city writing poems and drinking too much coffee. He resurfaced with an op-ed in The Atlantic, the voice I didn't hear. He tours universities now. His first book is called Unread Messages. He never answers phone calls after dark. Greta Mallon was never charged. She declined her retirement payout. The only person she speaks to regularly now is Carla's sister, whom she visits every Sunday. She brings lavender, always. Greta keeps a notebook by her bed titled, The Things I Never Said. As for Carla Jennings, there's a mural now, 4 stories tall, on the side of the corporate building she once fought to change. It's just her silhouette, back turned, looking upward. Beneath it are 5 words. She tried, she told, she endured. Some stories end in silence. Others become signal. This one? It became both.